When someone says something that irritates or insults you, it might seem like your emotional reaction is automatic, like you have no control over it, but in reality, that reaction is a physical response driven by your nervous system. Your body is wired to protect you from threats, and in modern situations, a sharp word or disrespectful tone is often interpreted as one. The moment you sense hostility, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. This is the part responsible for the fight or flight response, raising your heart rate, tightening your chest, and narrowing your focus. It's your biology preparing to defend or escape, even though there's no physical danger. That automatic response is a filter, not a fact. It doesn't mean you must react. You can build the skill of catching the signal before it becomes a reaction. You can train your nervous system to remain composed. This training doesn't require hours of meditation or a retreat from society. It starts in the moment with your breath. When triggered, most people breathe through the mouth and rapidly, which tells the body it's in danger. By simply switching to slow, deep nasal breathing, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system. This branch is responsible for rest, digestion, and recovery. It sends the message to your brain that you are safe, even when your emotions suggest otherwise. A slow inhale through the nose and an even slower exhale shifts your internal chemistry in seconds. Your heart rate slows, your muscles loosen, and your mind becomes less reactive. This is a biological doorway back to clarity. It's not willpower, it's technique. Mastering this response gives you leverage over your emotions. Another powerful method is what happens with your vision. When you're emotionally triggered, your vision narrows, a trait that evolved to help you spot and respond to threats quickly. But this narrow visual field also amplifies stress and tunnel thinking. You can break that loop by deliberately widening your gaze. Look out at the edges of your environment, letting your peripheral vision come online. This automatically reduces sympathetic tone in your body, calming your system from the outside in. This technique, called panoramic vision, can be done instantly, no special gear or setting required. It makes your body feel less under attack, allowing your mind to regain control. This works in real time, whether you're in a meeting, a conversation, or even facing online criticism. You're teaching your biology that not everything needs a reaction. And whether you're in emotions or in solitude, we are able to relate. When people feel angry or attacked, they often lean forward, tense their shoulders, or clench their fists. These physical signals reinforce a state of high alert in your brain. But when you intentionally adjust your posture, shoulders relaxed, chest open, feet grounded, you send a different message. Your body becomes a cue for safety and calm. This postural feedback loop is subtle but incredibly powerful. You're not pretending to be calm. You're informing your nervous system through your muscles that you're in control. The result is a calmer internal state without needing to suppress or deny your feelings. Over time, these small shifts compound into a baseline of unshakable composure. What's essential to understand is that your nervous system isn't your enemy. It's just trying to keep you safe. But in a world where most threats are emotional, not physical, your body often overreacts. Learning to work with your nervous system instead of against it gives you power. You stop being yanked around by emotions and instead become someone who can choose how to respond. That kind of control isn't about being passive or emotionless. It's about being selective. You learn to respond with clarity rather than react with chaos. The people around you may still be unpredictable or difficult, but they lose the ability to hijack your inner state. That is real freedom. You become anchored even in the storm. None of this is theoretical. The nervous system is plastic. It changes with practice. The more you interrupt emotional spirals using breath, vision, and posture, the more you rewire your baseline response. What once triggered anger now becomes a signal to pause and reset. And the more often you access that pause, the easier it becomes to stay there. The process is less about suppressing emotions and more about directing them. You can feel anger rising and still choose peace. You can feel your heart racing and still control your behavior. This isn't pretending you're fine when you're not. It's choosing to master your response rather than be owned by it. That's the ultimate mental strength. It helps to track your triggers, not to avoid them, but to train with them. Every encounter that frustrates you becomes a workout for your nervous system. You begin to anticipate your body's reaction and apply the tools early. Breathing slowly before a conversation. Using panoramic vision when you feel tension rise. Relaxing your shoulders when you feel heat build in your chest. These micro habits recondition your mind. The more reps you get, the less reactive you become. Eventually, what once made your blood boil barely registers. You become someone others can't provoke, not because you're numb, but because you're trained. This is how emotional stability is built, through practice, not through wishing it were different. What's also interesting is how others respond to your calm. When you don't take the bait, you change the dynamic of the interaction. People expect others to mirror their emotion. Anger invites anger. Sarcasm invites defensiveness. But when you stay calm and grounded, it creates dissonance. That dissonance often leads the other person to soften their tone or back down, not because you dominated the conversation, but because you changed the emotional atmosphere. Your regulation becomes contagious. You end up influencing the situation not by control, but by example. In doing so, you not only master yourself, but you lead others toward more peaceful interactions. At its core, staying calm is not about never feeling anger. It's about building the gap between feeling and reacting. That gap is a skill, and like any skill, it can be trained. The longer that gap becomes, the more space you have to choose the response that aligns with your values, not your impulses. Over time, this practice builds self-trust. You know that even in heated moments, you won't say or do something you regret. You become the type of person who's unshakable, not because you avoid emotion, but because you're fluent in managing it. That fluency comes from repetition, science, and awareness, not from trying to be perfect. The world is full of unpredictable people, opinions, and situations. Trying to control all of them is a losing game, but controlling how your nervous system responds, that's a game you can win. You can practice it every day in small moments, in traffic, in conversation, during stress. With each moment, you train your body to stay grounded when triggered, and with enough training, calm becomes your default, not your exception. The person who used to get under your skin no longer has that power. The noise around you doesn't disturb the peace within you. That's not magic, that's mastery. When someone offends you or tries to bring you down, the reaction often feels immediate and intense, but what actually happens is a complex interaction between your brain's interpretation and your emotional circuitry. The words themselves don't hold power. It's the meaning you assign to them that causes a reaction. This process is called cognitive appraisal, and it shapes every emotional response you have. If you label someone's comment as disrespectful or personal, your brain sends signals of threat, which trigger defensive emotions like anger or shame. But if you view the same comment as irrelevant, misinformed, or simply a reflection of their own state, the signal changes. Your brain no longer sees it as a threat, and the emotional reaction softens or disappears. The event stays the same, but the way your mind frames it changes everything. That's the core of cognitive reframing. It's how you choose your mental lens. This isn't just about positive thinking or pretending things don't bother you. It's about understanding that your thoughts are not facts. They are interpretations filtered through your experiences, emotions, and current state. You can train yourself to notice these thoughts as they arise and challenge them before they become emotional storms. This process, repeated over time, literally alters neural pathways in your brain. Your limbic system, which handles raw emotion like fear and anger, becomes less dominant in your responses. Instead, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for decision-making and emotional regulation, takes over. You begin to react with intention instead of instinct. Your brain becomes less reactive and more reflective. The people and situations that once provoked strong reactions lose their grip on your peace. You're not avoiding emotions, you're guiding them. One way to practice this is by asking yourself intentional questions when you feel provoked. Instead of immediately responding to the emotion, pause and ask, is this really about me? Often the answer is no. Most people speak from their own stress, fears, or frustration, not from objective truth. When you remind yourself of this, you shift your perception from personal attack to outside noise. You can also ask, what else could this mean? This invites alternative explanations, like the person being tired, misunderstood, or projecting. Your emotional response will often follow the story you tell yourself. So by choosing a better story, one rooted in neutrality or compassion, you choose a better emotional state. That mental shift weakens the grip of anger and gives you space to breathe. Another helpful question is, will this matter in a day, a week, or a year? This time framing tool helps reduce the emotional intensity of the moment. What feels unbearable now may feel insignificant tomorrow. Bringing that perspective into the present calms your mind. It doesn't mean the situation isn't valid. It just means you're placing it in a broader context. Most of our emotional overreactions happen because we zoom in too closely. Zooming out gives clarity. The moment you regain that clarity, your nervous system relaxes. Your breathing slows, your muscles unclench, and your thoughts become less hostile. You regain control not by force, but by perspective. That's the quiet power of cognitive reframing. It turns emotional chaos into composure. Another aspect of reframing is learning to separate someone's behavior from their identity. When people act badly, it's tempting to label them as bad people. But this kind of thinking traps you in judgment and fuels resentment. A more helpful approach is to focus on behavior rather than personality. Instead of saying, they're toxic, you can say, that was a hurtful thing to say. This distinction allows you to respond to the situation without getting consumed by emotion. It also reduces the tendency to ruminate because your brain isn't stuck in a loop of labeling and defending. The more you practice this, the easier it becomes to let go of minor offenses. You become a person who doesn't carry unnecessary weight. You move forward lighter, freer, and more emotionally agile. Reframing also applies to how you see yourself in difficult situations. When you're criticized, instead of thinking, I must not be good enough, you can think, this is an opportunity to learn or clarify. You don't internalize negativity as identity, you process it as information. That shift preserves your self-worth and keeps you calm. You realize that criticism doesn't define you unless you allow it to. This mindset creates emotional boundaries that protect your peace. You become less dependent on approval and less shaken by disapproval. Your emotional state becomes internally driven, not externally dictated. And with that, your confidence grows, not as arrogance, but as a quiet strength rooted in self-awarenesses. It's also important to remember that reframing is not repression. You're not pushing feelings away. You're redirecting them through conscious thought. This distinction matters because unresolved emotions don't disappear. They compound. Reframing allows you to feel emotions without being ruled by them. You acknowledge the anger, frustration, or disappointment, but you don't become it. Instead, you channel it through a different narrative, one that promotes understanding and control. Over time, this practice makes your emotional responses more aligned with your values, not just your impulses. You feel more like yourself, even in situations that once triggered you deeply. That's not emotional detachment. It's emotional discipline. Ideally, one of the greatest benefits of reframing is the ability to maintain peace in the face of chaos. When others are reactive, rude, or disrespectful, your calm becomes your power. People expect you to mirror their energy, but when you don't, it unsettles their pattern. Your composed presence acts as a buffer, diffusing tension instead of escalating it. In that state, you lead by emotional example. You influence more than just the moment. You influence the environment. Whether it's a workplace, a conversation with a loved one, or even an online comment section, your reframing skills shape the tone. You become the thermostat, not the thermometer. You set the emotional climate, rather than just measuring and reacting to it. This isn't about becoming emotionally numb or indifferent. It's about choosing your response with intention. It's about refusing to give your peace away for free. Every time you choose to reframe instead of react, you reinforce that choice as a habit. Your brain changes with repetition, creating new neural patterns that make calm your default response. Over time, this new pattern becomes automatic. You don't have to force it, you become it. The provocations around you don't disappear, but your relationship to them transforms. You begin to live with emotional sovereignty. You experience freedom, not from emotions, but through mastery of them. In a world where people are quick to anger and easily offended, the ability to reframe is a superpower. It allows you to move through life with clarity, resilience, and grace. It gives you the power to face conflict without fear and to stand firm without aggression. You no longer depend on the world to be kind or fair in order to feel okay. You create your own internal stability, regardless of the noise around you. That kind of mental freedom isn't a luxury. It's a discipline, and it's available to anyone willing to train the mind to lead the emotion, not the other way around. Staying calm in the face of disrespect or irritation isn't something you're either born with or without. It's a skill developed through repeated exposure to discomfort while staying regulated. Just like physical strength is built by lifting heavier weights over time, emotional strength is built by facing emotionally charged situations without breaking. Avoiding difficult people or uncomfortable conversations might bring short-term peace, but it prevents long-term growth. True emotional resilience is only developed by entering those situations and practicing control in real time. You don't grow by hiding from stress. You grow by training within it. This means deliberately using tools to stay grounded when tension rises. Each time you succeed, even just for a few seconds, your brain is learning a new response. It's not about perfection, but repetition. These moments become your training ground for calmness. When you're exposed to a stressful conversation, your body naturally reacts. Your heart may start to race, your voice might shake, and your thoughts can become scattered. This is the body's defense mechanism kicking in, preparing you to fight or flee. But just because your body feels urgency doesn't mean there's actual danger. In fact, that feeling becomes the exact signal to begin practicing. This is where the real work begins, right at the moment your mind says, "I can't handle this." That moment is an invitation to stay put, breathe deeply, and remain fully present. Even a few seconds of intentional calm during chaos rewires the brain. Over time, your threshold for discomfort rises. You stop getting overwhelmed by emotional pressure. What once hijacked your day now becomes a training opportunity. The goal isn't to suppress how you feel, it's to stay aware of it without acting out. You can be fully aware of your frustration or discomfort and still remain composed. This is the essence of emotional discipline. It starts by noticing the signs in your body before they explode into behavior. A clenched jaw, a racing heart, or tight shoulders are early signals that you're entering a reactive state. Catching these signals gives you a window of opportunity. In that window, you can make a conscious choice. Do I react out of habit, or do I respond with intention? That choice, repeated often, becomes your strength. It's how you transition from being reactive to being resilient. It's not about never feeling, it's about never being controlled by what you feel. Kind of exposure-based training happens best in small, everyday moments. You don't need life-altering arguments to build your skill. It can happen in traffic, during a frustrating email, or while waiting in a long line. These situations may seem minor, but they carry the same emotional charge that builds your tolerance. Think of them as mental push-ups. Every time you choose to stay calm instead of snapping, you're reinforcing new neural pathways. These pathways signal safety and control rather than panic and aggression. Your body starts to realize that stress doesn't have to equal chaos. It learns that you can remain in control even when your environment isn't. That's how you build a calm mind, not in isolation, but in the middle of life's noise. Repetition is the foundation of emotional mastery. No one becomes calm by deciding to be calm. They become calm by practicing it constantly. That means embracing difficult moments as practice rounds. You don't wait for perfect conditions to train. You show up every day using real-life friction as your workout. And like any skill, the beginning is messy. You'll fail, lose your cool, and feel like you're not making progress. But every failure is data. Every reaction is a reminder of where to strengthen. Eventually, you'll notice the time between stimulus and response growing wider. You'll feel space where there used to be panic. That space is freedom. In it, you find the ability to choose your response with clarity and power. What makes this process powerful is how it changes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is short-tempered or easily triggered. You start seeing yourself as someone who can be challenged and still stay grounded. That self-image reinforces your behavior. You begin to expect calmness from yourself, and your actions rise to meet that expectation. It becomes part of who you are, not something you struggle to maintain. You become a steady presence in chaotic situations, and others begin to notice, not because you talk about it, but because you radiate it. Your stability becomes contagious. It influences the mood of rooms and the tone of conversations. Calmness becomes not just something you practice, it becomes something you offer. The real transformation happens when you no longer fear tension or conflict. Instead, you see them as opportunities to test and reinforce your emotional strength. This shift changes everything. You stop avoiding difficult people. You stop dreading tough conversations. You enter them with the mindset of, this is practice. And because your nervous system has been conditioned, it doesn't spiral as easily. You begin to carry peace with you rather than chase it through avoidance. This doesn't mean you accept mistreatment or tolerate abuse. It means you no longer let someone else's behavior dictate your inner state. You control what you carry. That's the difference between reaction and regulation. Training your brain for calm doesn't require any special background. You don't need to be naturally patient or emotionally gifted. What you need is consistency and willingness. Willingness to stay present in discomfort and choose self-control even when it's hard. The more you do this, the less you fear emotional spikes. You start to trust yourself in difficult moments, and with that trust comes confidence. Not the loud, aggressive kind, but the grounded, quiet type. The type that doesn't need to prove anything. The type that just is. You realize that staying calm isn't about controlling everything. It's about mastering yourself no matter what happens. That's where real power lives. When you understand this, emotional regulation becomes less of a chore and more of a mission. It becomes part of how you live, work, and lead. You no longer wish for easier situations, you train for stronger responses. Every insult, delay, or disagreement becomes an opportunity to sharpen your discipline, and slowly but surely you transform, not because the world around you changes, but because your response to it does. You stop being pushed around by life's noise. You start to move with intention. Calmness becomes your baseline, not your exception. And in a world full of reactivity, that calmness sets you apart. Not as someone who avoids the fire, but as someone who walks through it, unfazed. Most people think emotional control means suppressing how you feel, but real mastery comes from learning how to process emotions through the body. Emotions are not just thoughts, they're physical experiences. You feel them in your chest, your stomach, your throat. When anger hits, your heart races, your jaw tightens, your body tenses. That energy needs somewhere to go, or it builds up and eventually explodes. Suppression only makes the pressure worse over time. What helps is becoming aware of the emotion in your body as it rises. Not fighting it, not feeding it, just observing. The moment you can label the emotion and locate it in the body, you start to disarm it. You take the power away from the reaction and return it to awareness. Breathing is the fastest, most reliable tool for this kind of emotional processing. The breath is the bridge between your mind and body. It's the only system you can control that immediately impacts your stress levels. When you breathe in a slow, deliberate way, especially through your nose and with longer exhales, your nervous system shifts. It moves out of the fight or flight state and into rest and regulate mode. You don't have to believe in it. The biology handles the work. This is why the first rule of staying unbothered is to regulate your body before reacting with your mind. The body will always signal before the mind explodes. If you intercept that signal with breath, you prevent escalation. With practice, this becomes automatic. You feel heat rise and you respond with control. Another technique is body scanning. Taking a few seconds to mentally move through your body and release the tension where emotions live. Most people store anger in their shoulders, jaw, and hands. When you're upset, you can bring awareness to those areas and actively relax them. This tells the brain that you're not in immediate danger, even if the situation is stressful. When the body feels safe, the brain stops signaling crisis. This subtle shift can mean the difference between snapping and staying composed. It also helps you stay in control of your voice and expression, which influences how others respond to you. People subconsciously read your body language. If your body is calm, your presence feels calm. And that sets the tone. Movement is another powerful way to clear emotion from the system. If you've ever gone for a walk after an argument, you've felt this in action. Movement helps metabolize adrenaline and cortisol, the stress chemicals released during emotional activation. This is especially useful if you've already reacted emotionally and want to reset. Going for a brisk walk, doing some light stretching, or even shaking out your limbs can signal to your nervous system that the threat has passed. This works because your body evolved to move through stress, not sit in it. Sitting still with rising emotion creates internal pressure. Moving through it lets the energy release. This isn't about avoiding feelings, it's about moving with them, letting them pass, and regaining balance. Touch can also be a form of regulation. Something as simple as placing a hand on your chest or rubbing your palms together can activate a soothing response in your nervous system. These are grounding gestures. They reconnect you with your body and signal safety. When used intentionally, they can quickly interrupt the buildup of emotional tension. Self-touch may seem small, but it speaks to the subconscious in a deep way. It communicates reassurance, presence, and calm. This is particularly useful in public or professional settings where you need subtle tools to stay composed. You don't need to explain or justify anything to others. You regulate from within quietly and powerfully. This is how you stay centered even when chaos surrounds you. Another underrated but powerful method is cold exposure. Splashing cold water on your face, using a cold compress, or taking a brief cold shower can shock the nervous system out of an emotional spiral. Cold activates the vagus nerve, which plays a key role in regulating stress and returning the body to a calm state. It creates a strong sensory input that pulls you out of your head and into the present moment. When you're trapped in overthinking or rage, that jolt of cold resets the system. It's not always convenient, but when available, it's incredibly effective. Athletes, soldiers, and high performers have used cold for decades to calm down and refocus quickly. It's a physical switch that changes the emotional state, sleep. And nutrition also play a critical role in how reactive or grounded you are. A tired brain has less capacity to regulate emotion. When you're sleep deprived, the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for emotional intensity, becomes hyperactive. This means small annoyances feel bigger and your patience wears thin faster. Eating poorly has a similar effect. Blood sugar spikes and crashes can make your mood unstable and your body jittery. A calm mind relies on a balanced body. When your physical systems are supported with rest, hydration, and nourishment, emotional regulation becomes easier. You're not fighting your biology, you're aligning with it. Calm doesn't just come from willpower, it comes from systems working together smoothly. A smooth abacus who stays rhythm. Humans are rhythmic creatures. Our brains respond well to patterned, predictable input. Tapping your foot, rocking back and forth, or listening to steady music can help soothe agitation. It may sound simple, but these actions activate areas of the brain that associate rhythm with safety. Think of how a baby is soothed by rocking. That response never fully leaves us. Incorporating rhythm into your routine, even as a calming playlist or steady breathing pattern, supports your body in staying regulated. You can't always control your environment, but you can control your rhythm. And rhythm calms chaos. All of this adds up to one powerful truth. Your body is the foundation of emotional control. You can't always think your way out of a strong reaction, but you can breathe, move, and feel your way through it. Your body remembers what calm feels like. The more you train it to return there, the faster it learns. Over time, these practices become second nature. You don't have to force calm, you return to it. Not because life got easier, but because your inner system got stronger. That's what makes you unbothered, not immunity from stress, but mastery over it. You don't need a perfect personality or a stress-free life to be composed. You need awareness, repetition, and respect for your biology. The people who seem unshakable aren't always naturally calm. They've just trained their systems to process stress more effectively. You can do the same. The process isn't complicated, but it requires consistency. You start by feeling what's happening in your body instead of running from it. You regulate before you react, You return to breath, to movement, to rhythm. And in doing so, you build a deep, steady calm, not the kind that breaks in the storm, but the kind that anchors you through it.